I'm going to introduce the team first, and I'm going to start in chronological order. That's Sanchit. You just heard him speak very eloquently this morning. He was part of the debate that happened, and he's going to talk on a very small segment of what we're doing today, but he's there all the same. And then we've got young Sydney Atkins, who chaired that debate. So effectively, he's a teacher of English, and he does a lot of things on the side, which I'm not telling you about now. We've got Ms. Shrikala, who is our counselor, and does far more than counseling. And I think every school should have someone like her with them. She's brilliant. We've got Mrs. Pawane, who's a very supportive parent, but a very critical one. And she's truly a friend of Modern. And when we say that, it's with true humility, because it's through this Friends of Modern that we've started on a journey that has completely changed our own perspective of school improvement. And that's why she's here to talk to you about this aspect of involving others and motivating others in the school improvement, which is what the topic for the day is. And I am Nargis Kambara, the Vice Principal of the school. And as you can see, the principal is very quietly sitting in the corner there, not playing any part of this program on or sharing in this, only because we at Modern truly believe that it's only through involving others and motivating others that you can achieve genuine improvement in all practices that we take on, and that's something we truly believe. And I think that was the quote that we really wanted to start off with. And I think I don't need to explain that. It's self-explanatory. If you really don't know where you're going, it doesn't matter which road you're going on. And I think the most important thing here is vision. And when we're talking about vision, I think it's not only that vision statement on the wall that we are so used to. And that vision statement has to speak to you and be alive, and has to be contributed to by a whole lot of people who are involved in really where the school is going. And at Modern, we did an exercise some years ago, and I think it's time now to do that exercise again, and that is to revisit your vision statement. And we have students, teachers, parents, and of course the leadership team contributing towards what would they like their school to be. And as you can see there, if you're pulling in different directions, you're not going to go anywhere. Like I think the lady, the brilliant speaker this morning, who shared her experience at the North Pole with us, and she says they were skiing in one direction, but the ice was was drifting in another direction, and were they going anywhere? Not really. And so it's important for everyone to buy into that vision and to really, really pull in the same direction. And the other thing that we look at closely, when we're talking about, we've got this vision in place, but now the mission. And that's, while the vision is aspirational, the mission leads on to how are we going to achieve that? Who is all this for, and why are we doing it? And I think this is something that we would like to share with you, and I'm sure you do this in all your schools, that whatever you do, it is the best interest of the children. And that is always your focal point. And I think if that is your primary interest, we really can't go wrong with that. I think the other thing, before we get on to this, the other thing is that we truly believe at Modern, and that is that an ounce of planning is worth a pound of effort. And you definitely have to plan well for what you're going to execute for the interest of those children. Now, really, we followed what is called VAL-ED, that is the Vanderbilt Assessment of Leadership in Education. And I'm not going to go through each one of these and talk about them, but I'm going to use an example where we've actually used it, and it will come alive, hopefully, if you can just go to the next slide, please. Now, please feel free to pick up a copy of this as you go out. This is our standards for foreign language learning. And the reason why we put this out here today is because we've used this Vanderbilt's method very effectively, and we use it for everything actually, but we've used it very, very effectively for improving Arabic across the school. And this was an issue with us, and we had various factors that we couldn't really work our way around. and there was a big struggle as to what and how should we go about it. And our 6-point method really helped a lot. If you look at the planning stage there, we decided that definitely there have to be strong targets or very valid targets which were achievable. And at some point, I think Shrikala will talk to you about SMART targets. But what was equally important was that the leadership team got access to this document, which is the standards for foreign language learning. And we said Arabic is, at the end of the day, I must give you perspective of the school for those of you who don't know. We used to be known as Dubai Modern High School. Of course, now we are the GEMS Modern Academy. And we have around 3,400 children. We are a mixed gender school. We've also got, we're located in Nadal Shiba, and we follow the ICSE curriculum. Just got accreditation for the IB program. Now, with this in mind, so our children don't speak Arabic. The issues were that they don't get an opportunity to speak Arabic around Dubai as well. This is something common we all face. And so how do we improve standards of Arabic when there is no interest to learn Arabic at all? And this document showed us the way, really, because it is a foreign language. And so if this is implemented by the American Council, and if you read their statement of philosophy, it's quite simple really and quite good to follow. They've got what they call the 5 C's, and that is through communication and culture and connections, etc. They give you standards. When you're in grade 4, this is what you should be doing for communications. This is what a child should have achieved for cultures, for knowing culture, etc. Or for making connections, being able to make connections. And this gave us the blueprint really for how we should go about it. Now, to implement it, you definitely needed the support. And so we did something different. We looked at the English department, we looked at the French department to actually correlate and come together and help the Arabic department. So while this document was it's not very exhaustive, it's short and it's sweet, but it shows the path. So we know that by grade 4, by grade 8 and by grade 12, these are the standards that the teaching of any foreign language is expected to achieve. And so we said, how do we convert this into Arabic? For the Arabic teachers to really know how to execute this. And so the English department, a few chosen members sat down with a few members of the Arabic department for up to grade 4, up to grade 8, and up to grade 12, and they said, now this is what this document said, what are you currently doing? And they mapped what they were doing with what was in store in there. And they came up with a plan whereby those standards were achieved at those critical grade levels. And the other one was, how do we make Arabic interesting? And so we pulled out people from the French department because they do a jolly good job of actually making sure that the children enjoy French, and they've got little tips and tricks with them that makes it interesting and exciting. And so we involved the French department to collaborate with the Arabic department, and that's how we really took this forward. Now, if you look at advocating, the consensus is that, but we don't need to have high expectations. And we've intentionally put in special needs there. Here, special needs has a different connotation. It really reflects here all those who are not interested in learning Arabic. We feel that if they're not interested, well, that's a special need we've got to surmount. And what are we really going to do about that? And therefore, the thing was to challenge those low expectations. See, that's absolutely not acceptable. And of course, we put strategies in place for that. And then, of course, communicating, and Mrs. Pavani will bear this out. She's smiling already. But when we had an info pack session, we have these regular info pack sessions for sharing with our parents. And at that point in time, at the principal's directive, I think we stepped in and we said that, look, parents need to know, because this is the feedback that we're getting, that the school is not doing enough for Arabic. And we said, we're bending backwards for Arabic. We're bending backwards to make sure our children are learning. So why aren't parents getting this? I said, all right, so we need to inform parents. And therefore, that communication became very important. And at info pack sessions, we made it a point to put ourselves out there and say, this is what we're doing for Arabic, and this is what we're actually doing. And that worked well because parental involvement became very strong at that point. Not everybody, as always, but the few who were there. And of course, monitoring. Before Sydney takes over, is our school ready for change? Is our school ready to manage that change? And we're always dependent on people to deliver that change. And we said that it's dependent on two things really, on the ability of an individual and the willingness. And the ability ties in very well with involving people. So we know who's got the right expertise for doing what kind of job, at least we hope we know, and we do different things to get to know that. And then, of course, it's the willingness. Sometimes you have people who are very able and are just not willing at all. And that's where Shrikala comes in with all her motivational strategies and makes sure that they really are motivated to get willing to be able to do that. But also you have, in boarding school parlance, it's called the enthu cutlet. I don't know if you've heard of this term. It's somebody who's very enthusiastic and wants to do everything, but they don't have the ability. And so developing that ability becomes important, and I think Sydney will take you to the next part of this.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to talk about something that ideally deserves a very dedicated discussion, and that's change. But just before that, last night I read a blog post which I forwarded to some of my friends in school that talked about the characteristics of a 21st century educator. And one of those characteristics, I think one of the first few that appeared on that list was 21st century educator is adaptive. And is adaptive because in this current educational climate that we find ourselves in, where change is constant, being adaptive is no longer an option, it is a necessity, and we need to be able to accept change. Having said that, we know that change comes with a lot of baggage, and there's a lot of other things that are that go along with change. But we're going to look at just two fundamental aspects. What motivates you to change things in your school? Why do we change things? Do we change things for change's sake? Or is there a long-term goal in mind? Do we have something planned? And that brings us back to our vision. We believe very strongly that unless we have a shared vision of where we want to be as an institution and where we want to go in the coming years as an institution, change cannot be possible. And so this shared understanding of where we are as a school and where we want to be needs to be filtered down before any sort of change takes place. So vision is extremely important, and along with that, assessing the needs of the school becomes very important, because unless you know what your school requires and unless you know the kind of change your school requires, really you don't know how to proceed with that change. So assessing a need and having a common vision that's shared by everybody are extremely important for change to come about. But there are detriments to change, and we know that fear is one of them. And we know that the mindset is a huge contributor to how we feel about change. And we know that we have in our schools educators who've been there for many years, for whom change can be a very daunting possibility. And we don't see that as such a big detriment. We know and we acknowledge its presence, but we understand that if there is a shared vision, and if there is a collective understanding of what we hope to aspire to, or the kind of change we want to bring about and the reasons why we want that change, then the fear is diminished, there is no more ambiguity, and that change can take place. I don't want to sound like I'm giving you rhetoric and giving you jargon, so I'll give you an example. Recently, grades 4 to 8 of our school switched to digitization of our textbooks, and we've gone completely digital. And now this wasn't a change because EdTech has become a big talking point across the world, and we didn't do this overnight. It was always part of our vision. We always envisioned Modern being the kind of school that would embrace technology for all the various reasons and all the benefits that it has. But we've also faced a lot of fear from the teachers, from the teaching community, on how they would embrace this change and how they would adapt to using tablets in the classroom instead of books as they traditionally did. But that fear was lessened to a great extent when we explained to them the rationale behind. And when the teachers sat down together and discussed together, and we have open sessions where we have question-answer sessions and all these fears are voiced, they realized that the need for change was more important than the fear of that change. And I'm happy to tell you that we've already implemented using of tablets in the classroom. So just to sum up quickly, I have a slide I would like to show you. And it's a very powerful slide if you ruminate over it for some time. And there's a handout here that you can take when you're leaving on your way out. But it is a nice tool to use when you go back to your schools and talk about the need for change and the necessity for change. But if you look at the top level there, it says in order to get change, there are certain ingredients that you require. the main ingredients require are trust, vision, skill, resources, payoff, action plan, and shared values. But what the rest of the slide does is it takes away one of these elements. So, for example, if you took away trust from your plan for change, if there was no trust among your staff, among the people in your teaching community, what you would be left with is sabotage. And that's why it's extremely important that everybody is on the same page before any sort of change is implemented in your school. For example, if skill were missing when you take on a huge role of change in your school, you would be left with anxiety, because people will not be able to adapt to that kind of change and will not be able to accept and embrace change so willingly. And similarly, for example, if the resources for that change were missing, you would be left with very, very angry people, angry teachers who really want to help but are not in a position to do so. So we thought that this was a nice exercise you could take back to your schools and look at how you see change and how your teachers see change.
This morning, I know you know all this, and you know that we have to do this, but sometimes the question is, how do you get your teachers to do it? How do you get them to stop complaining about the workload, which everything that you understand, but how do you get them to do it? And this morning I was listening to those young ladies, debaters, and thinking, oh my God, she's got my lines. But we can sit here and talk, and probably you as heads of schools and leaders will know much more than me on motivation. But I just really want to touch upon 3 points. One, of all the theories in work motivation, and yes, I did get back to my psychology textbooks last night, is Frederick, I suppose I didn't read well enough, but it was his theory on work motivation that talks about hygiene factors and motivators. Quite simply, if you have more of motivator factors in your environment, in your schools, which means, do they know what they're doing? Do they understand what they're doing? Do they believe in what they're doing? Do they have a sense of autonomy, or are you sitting on their heads at all the time? Do they have a sense of creativity? Those are your motivator factors. The hygiene factors are the basic things, the pay, the fact that you know you have a job for them, the regular stuff. So as head of school, if you want to go back, or as leaders of a department, you want to go back and say, what sort of factors do my teachers work here for? Do you have more? Are they here because the hygiene factors are present? Because that will stop the dissatisfaction from creeping in, but that doesn't mean they're happy. That doesn't mean they understand what you're talking about. Or are they here because there are more motivator factors? Am I giving them a sense of understanding? Quite simply, do they know what they're doing? And I'm just going to pick off points from what Sydney and Mrs. Kambata said about the vision. I know that these are probably words we've been using for a couple of years now, but really it's about, and world over, all over the world, studies show that the single most important motivator for people is knowing that they're doing meaningful work, that this is making sense. Now, for this to happen, you must have a scaffolding of information. You must have an isolation. And I think this is one of the things that's really, I've been at Modern for a little close to a decade now, and this is one of the things that keeps me there, because there is no centralization of information. There's no centralization of facts. It's not top down. It is about sharing information and not leaving anyone out in isolation. If you look at our team, we are an example of the fact that there's no aspect of our team members or of our school members who don't know and don't have a role to play, some role to play in school improvement. The second thing that I want to get to is, and it helps because I am counselor for the students, but I also have staff talking to me, and a lot of it is, I've seen the teachers, they want to learn. They want to make an effort, and they just need to be told how to do it. And this is where I would say performance management, where your teacher quality cycle and your observations come in, finding out what is it that they really need. What is the information that they need? All too often, I hope it doesn't happen here, but all too often we approach workshops which are disseminating a certain kind of information, but it's not what they need, it's not what the teachers need. The only way you can find out what they need is by having a consistent, rigorous program of need identification. I'm not sure if educational institutions have what they call in the corporate world a TNA, an active procedure of identifying what needs of individuals are. But it helps tremendously for us at Modern. It's one of the reasons why every Thursday for the last 1 year we've had PD workshops. And it's all identified, much like it is today, what you would like to go to. There are some things that we identify very concretely, as Sydney will tell you in a little while about the quality cycle, where because of SLT observations, we will, class observations, we help identify the need for a teacher. But we also allow teachers to identify what are their own personal needs, and it can be completely outside their area of expertise. Thirdly, along with the fear of change, I think, and because this is what I've seen, it's boredom. Sometimes it's just plain boredom. And I think we're also resource managers in the sense that understanding what people want to do. Are they doing things? They're not really fearing change because they don't understand. Maybe they've understood enough, but they want to do something else. 2 years ago, we were all sent a little mail by Mrs. Kambata telling us that aside from our daily duties, and our core task expectancies, is there something else that we wanted to do along with our extracurricular, and did we want to try on different roles, did we want a profile change? And I can't tell you, it's 2 years down the line that we have this wonderful synergy. We've got different people taking on different things, and we've seen such sides of teachers that we didn't know existed. Let me give you a very simple example. It struck me last night. The examination system that's been there forever and working very efficiently. Probably as a result of this, we have teachers, we have an entire examination team, we have an examination center, and if you ask me what did we do, we picked up teachers who are good at organization, who are very systematic, who know how to handle data. And these are the soft skills, the kind of things that we don't really have time to develop or explore because we're busy finishing portion. But and I can see how these three teachers are experiencing such a sense of involvement in what the school is doing. Now, this particular slide is really self-explanatory, so I'm really going to call your attention only to two things. The third point, intellectual space. Every idea, and I'm saying this because I've given a lot of ideas, not that they're all accepted, but every idea is listened to and considered. Every idea, and I know, I can vouch for the fact that it means everybody has open access, everybody has access to inform what they want to know, what is the change they want to see, and that is one of the key aspects to motivation, not isolating anybody from the school. The other point I want to bring your attention to is the conscious promotion of a feel-good culture. Something that has its flip sides is that sometimes we've become not we as a school, but I think the world in large has become a sort of a CC culture. Everybody gets CC'd into mails and everybody gets forwarded mails. But we've developed, I think it was a little unconscious to begin with, but it's become a very systematic procedure now, where we actually pass on somebody's idea with some kind of feedback about that. So in the process, however small it may be, it could be something about discipline in the bus bay, it could be something about the canteen food, it could be something focused on the curriculum. But when that sort of, and very specific focused praise is passed on, again, it has led to a widespread sense of community in the school. And that really is one of the, I think that's the bedrock of our entire school improvement program.
Just took some of her lines. I think she's taken some of mine. So I'm not going to go back and go over some of the things she talked about. But we're looking at professional development. We're looking at improvement, and we're looking at the improvement of teaching, learning in our school and in your schools. So we're going to share with you two systems that we have in place. These are homegrown systems. They're very robust, working very effectively. And I'd like to draw your attention to what we call the quality cycle, which is teacher observation cycle. And what happens is when, for example, a new teacher comes into Modern High, the new teacher is sent for a peer observation, which is very focused observation. Could be inter-department, it could be intra-department, and as a result of this exercise, the teacher then identifies 2 good practices that he or she would like to implement in his or her own class. When that teacher is ready to use those practices, he or she invites an SLT member into their room, and very positive, very timely, critical feedback is given to these teachers. The idea behind it, the philosophy behind it is for every teacher to eventually become an outstanding teacher. And if you take a handout when you're leaving on your way out, you will see that this entire system ensures that there is a gradual progression and there's a gradual move towards improvement in teaching learning. I think another thing that we do extensively and we do really well is internal PD sessions as well as external, because again, coming back to need assessment and coming back to the vision that we have for our school, we know our school best and we know our strengths best and we know our weaknesses best. And so the internal PDs cater to all our internal needs and what we want to filter down department-wise or teacher-wise. And we have a very robust system of external PDs where teachers will go out to PD sessions and come back and then filter down that knowledge. So this shared practice of sharing your best practices, of sharing information, also goes a long way in motivating your staff. It motivates your staff to share what they do best, to share ideas, to share methodologies, to share pedagogy, and it goes a long way in improvement. Coming back to the organization chart, which many people have many opinions about, but all we want to show you today is that a couple of years ago, if you had seen this organizational chart, it would have been a very limited chart. But it would have been a very small chart with the principal and the headmaster and a couple of SLT members maybe. But over the years, because we have identified people with great skill and great talent through the PD cycles and through the observations and through asking them what they would like to involve themselves in, we have realized that spreading out of leadership helps us reach our goals and helps us reach improvement. And so you will see that the organization chart that you are looking at now has spread out largely, and we have in place HODs, we have in place academic coordinators, we have house coordinators, and leadership is spread across the school so that the improvement comes quickly and effectively with a large number of people involved as opposed to just a few people.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a parent of Modern Eye for the past 12 years, and I've been a member of Friends of Modern. Enriching experience, proven today that I've been called to speak in front of all of you. Feel very small in front of such heads of schools. Friends of Modern High is a representative body where we meet regularly and we discuss wide range of issues. It's a link between the school and the parent body, and we have always been free. We can give our suggestions and they have been implemented, 2 of which I would like to discuss right away. The members of the parent representative body felt that communication is a very important and key core if you want good leaders. We felt that communication and leadership, when put together, would motivate and influence the students within the organization. The school, on their part, took up our issue and they hired a professional teacher, to implement the program for communication. Various other teachers were guided and trained so that they could in turn train the students. The program was made mandatory for grade 3s and above, and the students were given an option where they could sit for the exam, the Trinity College exam in communication. And last year, my son too had sat for it and they all did brilliantly. The second program, the activities for curriculum enrichment, called the ACE program at Modern. We as members felt that there had to be a streamlined effort so that we could get the proper feedback as to what our children is doing after school hours. The school and some of our members, along with the ACE committee, they streamlined and they worked towards certain aspects of the program, and the school provided us with the end of term ACE activities report card. That was very enriching because at the end of every term, we as parents realized what our children were doing in school. So you can see the link between the parents and the school, and you can see how we as parents, in whatever small way, we enrich the students, and in turn, we also involve the parents in a good engagement between the school and themselves. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Gandhi. We're running out of time, so we're actually going to spend some time on this funny man up there because there's lots to talk about him. But I think we're going to cut it short and just let Sanchit speak on one aspect of it.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So I'll just be talking to you about two main things. I'll talk to you about how students at Modern High are motivated to take responsibility for our own learning. And then I'll talk about the larger issue of how students in Modern High at GEMS Modern Academy are involved in school improvement. So taking responsibility for your own learning. When I first heard that term, I honestly had no idea what it meant. But then after going through several years at Modern, I realized something, that at Modern we're all asked, or rather motivated, to prioritize our education. We're all motivated by everything around us to pay attention and focus in class and go home and study. So I was thinking about what is it that motivates us. So I'll give you a very good example. So the DSIB has a certain set of guidelines for what makes an outstanding school. And within those guidelines, there is a set of criteria for what makes an outstanding learner. So our senior leadership team, the SLT, cut out what makes an outstanding learner and explained it to the prefectorial body, who in turn examined and studied it. And then this very same prefectorial body took that set of criteria, and went to every single class and spoke to them about it. It asked them, so where do you think your class stands if we give you this set of guidelines? And you see simple things like this, just talking to students, giving them a scale by which to measure themselves just motivates us, because at the end of the day, all of us just want to be outstanding. So because of this, classrooms just worked together to say, okay, I think that in this particular area we could do better. So let's try and improve let's try and enhance our education or our school experience by ensuring that we become outstanding learners. Even stuff like the self-evaluation forms we are asked to fill out at the end of every term. So this is just basically a blank paper which has got around 4 questions. Where do you see yourself next term? Have you achieved your goals this term? And questions about your performance and what you feel about it. So it's these little things which help you set realistic goals and just motivate you and encourage yourself to go on and perform academically. And moving on to the larger issue of what students experience here, it's how we are motivated to enhance our school experience. How are we involved in school improvement? So I believe that at Modern, all students are empowered to take up new initiatives, to think of innovative ideas, present them at a forum, and then implement them. So I'll just talk about 2 ideas which our batch in cooperation with the batch above us, who have just passed out, have come up with. So there was an idea called TLCOM. So what this means is, it allowed students to talk about any single subject they wanted to. It could be about astrophysics or nuclear physics or chemistry or anything, and a video would be taken and posted on a site. Very similar to TED Talks. But the thing about this idea was that it was entirely student-driven. There was no involvement of any teacher. Of course, they supported us when we asked for it. But the entire idea was just run by our students. And it's this thing which happens at Modern which motivates us to participate in school improvement. It's because we are the ones who take up an idea, think of one, and just implement it. And now TLCOM really works in our school. Another idea was something called the flip class. It's a flip class. By that, we do our classwork at home and our homework in class. It's the very basic layout of the flip class. And it was implemented in almost every single class of middle school. And it was all done by our students. So I think it's little things like this which students are allowed to do at our school, at GEMS Modern Academy, which really motivates us and encourages us to participate in school improvement. And this is how I feel that that GEMS Modern Academy really involves us in our school improvement.
I think if we go back to the previous slide, which we wanted to but didn't really talk about, with all the things really that we're putting in place, ultimately it leads to teachers being inundated with things that they are expected to do, and getting completely bogged down with all the expectations that is laid on them. But there are 2 things which I think has come out through all of our discussions, and that is providing direction and exercising influence, which really helps calm it down. And we had another image up there which shows what happens, the aha moment for the teacher after this is done well, but we've knocked that slide off. And to take a minute to talk about providing direction, it's not always coming from the top down. And that's why this morning's debate was so effective. Very, very often, we have direction coming bottom up. And because the senior leadership team definitely needs direction. Otherwise, we'll be doing our own thing and there'll be a complete disconnect. And one of the things that a bottom-up direction worked well on was our development of what is known as our AERO format. And it's, again, teachers were struggling with things like differentiation because it's not part of Indian pedagogy. It's very much part and parcel of Western pedagogy, but it isn't really part and parcel of ours. And so we were wondering how to crack this. And we stumbled upon this format, again used in America very effectively, but we adopted it and adapted it to suit our purpose. And now we've got very clearly, as part of our AERO format, and the teachers are working on it bit by bit. So they've just started, we've finished one particular segment of it. They've got a core, they've got, which is expected for everybody, and then of course they've got an extended version of that, and that is how do you drill deeper and enhance that learning further so students are kept engaged effectively, have a deeper understanding of what is being taught without galloping ahead and without there being a disconnect, but having a much deeper understanding. And of course there's the basic, which is the level higher, which is used for low achievers with certain category of sense students that we aspire towards. And that's one standard example of how the direction was given the other way around. And as far as exercising influence, I think you must have gauged from all of this, and there's so many kinds of influence at play. And peer-to-peer influence is really the best, and that's the most untapped. And that's something we're actively working on, because that peer-to-peer influence, it works like magic. And there's nothing that we do or anybody else does that works as well as peer-to-peer influence. There are a whole lot of influences at play, which I'm sure in your own schools, the dynamics of how influence works varies from school to school. And we were in another workshop a minute ago, and before we entered this one, we were in another workshop, and there they talked very, very extensively on how a simple pedagogical influence is exerted by learning walks. And the very fact that we know those learning walks are in place, that's something we are planning to begin. When we heard somebody else is doing it, we said, all right, so this is standard practice as well. But we felt the need for it, and so we're going to do it. And somebody else is already doing it, and that the influence that those learning walks actually have is quite tremendous.
We were just to go through, and as a thread that will sum up the whole thing would be goal setting, which is SMART objectives, not an unfamiliar term, but if it is specific, it is measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound, then it obviously gets us where we want to go in terms of planning as well as motivation, because we need to scaffold motivation as well. Collaborative.
Yeah. We already talked about the collaborative angle, and I'm not going to dwell too much on it. But the very fact that simple things like making departments work together, for example, the Arabic department working with the French department and the English department to streamline their curriculum, is a fine example of collaborative learning.
And before we end the session, really, I think overcoming barriers to improvement it should be a session by itself. But really, I think what the understanding that we have at Modern is that there's nothing that cannot happen if you wanted to, and there's nothing really that is a barrier or an obstacle, which is just if you look at it as an opportunity, then it has a different dimensions, and whether it's resources or whether it's whatever it is, and it's easy to say, but as a school, there are some schools who have all the resources and there are some who don't. But we've seen fine examples of students being innovative. They want to put the periodic table on the ceiling, and so they hand paint these little tiles and put the periodic table on the ceiling. We've got in our school, for example, we wanted to generate a traffic park. There was no extra room for it, so we converted one of those areas into an innovative teacher converted it into a traffic park so that the kindergarten students could learn. And this could easily happen in your bus bay parkings and wherever else when you don't have things lined up there. The learning corner talks, there were corners during the break, that which is corners. And they've become vibrant hubs today because our students, as part of, probably also as part of our TLCom, that who come out and speak about something that they're so passionate about. They have debates there, and this is something during break time. And you see children standing with their tiffins, eating and listening and challenging what the speaker is saying. Sometimes they heckle him or her, but that's all part of it, isn't it? Really, that's our 6-point formula, which will be put up on the net, I'm sure. We just want to take a minute to reflect on this particular one, whether our school improvement planning is really shallow, is it deep, or is it profound? Are we only scratching the surface when we're really talking about school improvement? And I think if you just look at the movement from shallow to deep to profound, it's self-explanatory really, but the last one really ties in with everything that we've been talking about. And I know Shrikala would like to talk about the motivation bit, extrinsic, intrinsic, and then authentic, but I'm going to skip that one and just talk about the last one. And it's shallow when there's dependency. It's deep when you're independent, but really it's profound when you're interdependent. Thank you very much.